welcome everyone to another episode of Spirit Talks. I am the Hermit and today we are talking about soulmates. Now, this episode is going to be very interesting because it is something that I've spoken about before. I've hinted at this topic before in other content that I've made, whether it's in my tarot reading, whether it's on my blog site, which is something that we will be talking about today. We're going to be referencing a blog that I made roughly a year ago, I believe. I'm not too sure. We can verify the date. Let's check to see. Gosh, how long ago did I make this? You know what, I can't get too into that rabbit hole because before we get into the formal proceedings, I do want to quickly acknowledge the traditional landowners of the land that I am hosting this podcast on today, the Jabbergai people. I want to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Now, oh my gosh, you guys, I'm so excited to talk about this topic because it's going to be a little bit lighter, and I think that the main aim behind this soulmate episode is to broaden your mind when it comes to the people who come into your life. Often I feel many of us have this idea that there is only one person in the world that can make us happy, and that a soulmate is something very rare and hard to come by, when actually it's the exact opposite. You are afforded many soulmates in your lifetime. So that is what we are going to be covering today. Now, as always, if you've been watching Spirit Talks for a little while, you'll realize that I do like to answer some comments in the beginning, some questions that are sent through, and today is no different. I also need to comment on the weather because I feel like I do that every podcast now. It is a beautiful sunny day here in Cairns, but it is also very, very windy. So I do need to address the elephant in the room as always. We do our best with the audio, but honestly, I really just love filming out here in this natural setting rather than in a studio or in a, room. Okay, so as I said, we're going to answer some questions first. Now, I have a huge list of questions here. In fact, before I forget, I'm going to make sure I record my screen for the wonderful Mr. Digital so that he can have a look at what I'm looking at. I think the first question that I want to answer is this question that was sent through by Shivrani. Can you please make a more detailed video on how to understand divine connections better, and that it's not your mind playing tricks, but you're truly guided towards a particular person or connection? See, that's pretty much what today's video is kind of about. The thing about divine connections is they actually thrive when you're not trying to label them. When you're simply embracing that almost like 9th house Sagittarius energy of living in the moment with the feelings that you have and just staying in that present energy of making the most out of the time that you have with that person. I feel like it only becomes confusing when you attempt to label or design it to be a certain way. And you see this a lot in many different styles of divine connections, whether it's divine counterparts, twin flames, soulmates, people who you just want to spend the rest of your life with. It feels like a lot of that pressure comes from this need to label and define and fit it into a certain box. So I want to say that divine connections in general are so diverse, and obviously there's the other side of the spectrum as well when we look at catalysts and soul catalysts and people who enter our life for the pure purpose of pushing us further along in our journey, however destructive their presence is. So today we are going to be looking at the soulmate divine connections and the complexities of those soulmate connections as well. I also want to address this question which Priscilla has sent forth: how to complete shadow work and healing, what methods are healthful, and methods aren't. I'm sorry, I really butchered that. What methods are helpful and what methods aren't? What triggers shadow work, and does shadow work ever end? That's a really good question. Honestly, in this lifetime, based on the limited experiences that I've already had, I would argue that no, it doesn't ever end. I would comfortably say that it does get easier and better the more that you address it. So I've talked about this on this podcast before, but I am someone who spent a long time running from certain issues in my life, and it took for certain people to come in and trigger me to see those issues for me to want to address them and work on them. And even then, like, you don't really ever stop seeing them. I think the best way that I could describe this is that your shadow forms part of who you are, just like the analogy of, or the example of yin and yang. It's not just masculine and feminine, it represents these two energies sort of working within one being. So it's this feeling as though you have to learn to be at peace with your shadow aspects, and you will find peace with them as long as you're not running from them. And I do think that the shadow aspects of a personality can be very challenging, because it's often parts of your personality that you've been taught to feel ashamed of, or it's parts of your personality that you've been shown to suppress and hide and feel like they're weaknesses. So to give you an example, the shadow aspects of my personality, it depends on which energy I'm in. For example, I grew up in a very culture strong family, and there are very clear defined gender roles in our family, and women should behave a certain way within the cultural dynamics of a family. So you're expected to fulfill those certain gender roles. You're suspected to cook and clean and do these things and not have to be asked to. And you're expected to be that person who's on their feet catering for people at family events, and you're expected to do these things. And to resist any of that could be seen as shameful, or very much what's another word for it? Just like shameful is probably a heavy enough word in itself. So for me personally, like, I do have parts of my personality that likes to challenge these things and question these things and look at things differently. Like, I actually see that submissive side of my personality as a weakness, because I do have very masculine qualities as well. So it'll differ depending on who you are, but your shadow forges your personality. Your shadow is not something that you should feel shameful towards. It's something that you've been conditioned one way or another to feel guilty about. And another example of this is that I am an assertive go-getter person. I come across, when you first meet me, as very, very strong. I look extroverted in certain social situations, but I'm actually not. And I think that I was always very ashamed of having those strong placements in my personality, those strong, like, needing to kind of steer the conversation and wanting to ask people a million questions, because I would always leave thinking, oh God, I've just made a fool out of myself, or you're supposed to let the man lead, and all these other, like, pompous societal based expectations. And I don't know, through growth, through healing, through understanding myself better and knowing what makes me happy, I've learned to realize that those aren't parts of my personality to feel ashamed of. And obviously there are a lot of darker sides to your shadow self as well, and part of my shadow self is living with my mental health and my depressive episodes and all my anxiousness and learning how to live with it, not trying to pretend like it doesn't exist, acknowledging that it's there, it's a part of me. It doesn't rule or dictate my whole being, but it is a part of me, and it's a part of me that I shouldn't feel ashamed of. So your shadow is complicated. You can't technically ever finish it. It's a part of who you are, and often certain parts of your shadow work is linked to painful moments in your past, and these can be quite traumatic. These can be events that you don't want to revisit, which is why it feels like it's something that is even bigger than it is, when actually, for example, for me, I am this sort of independent go-getter person because I've had to be my whole life. I've had to look after myself. I've had to look after the ones I love. I've had to do it out of a place of trauma. So I guess being ashamed of that side was denying all of the things that I had been through and minimizing them for what they were, which were true testaments of strength towards my character. So it really does depend on how you're able to grow through your shadows and how you're able to see them in a healthier way, so that you're not limiting your own growth, your own happiness, and so that you're understanding that parts of those shadow aspects will always be a part of you. It's who you are. And it's coming back to that idea that nobody's technically perfect. We're all imperfectly perfect individuals. You know, we all come with our own stuff. And it's one of those things that you have to find peace within yourself in order to let others see it as well, if that makes sense. Now, let's see what else. I might have time to answer like 1 or 2 more questions because, gosh, you know me, I talk too much. Yeah, we might do that at the end. Somebody's asked for, there's so many shadow work videos. I feel like I need to do a specific podcast on shadow work and dark nights of the soul as well. I have to do that as well. A lot of people asking about spiritual abilities. Goodness, I think we could do that as well. I'm thinking of doing that in a future podcast with my mother, because she is someone who can astrally project herself, and I'm so curious about that. I'd love to pick her brains more. We obviously have had conversations in the past, but she's a very busy woman. She's hard to tie down, very, very busy. So I would love to get her on here and talk to her about spiritual abilities and just different ways of connecting with your intuition. She's someone who's just recently started getting into spirituality singularly. She's always been influenced by religion into spirituality, or culture into spirituality. So she's just starting to carve her own path, and it's so beautiful to watch. So I think she'll be a very refreshing voice to have on here, because she obviously has so much wisdom on top of this fresh, like, spiritual set of eyes. All right, let's see if there's anything else. I loved it if you could talk about spiritual awakenings, ascension, steps, stages. What exactly is the difference between the two? I just want to touch on this briefly because it's quite a diverse, deep question. And in all honesty, the difference between awakening and ascension is that you can awaken without ascending, but the idea of ascending is that you're elevating your vibration and your wisdom on this earth as well. So the idea of ascending for me is that it coincides with a significant event in your life that affords you more logical wisdom as well as like depth to your character. So for example, often this will happen when you go through a breakup and you have to process, almost grieve that person. It can also happen when you lose someone that you love. You have to grieve that person and your life with them, and you have to try to leave yourself open to what the future may hold. And often the easiest way to do that is just by living in the present moment. When you lose someone you love, it's so difficult to imagine a future without them. You just have to say, I'm just taking it day by day. And that is often when most of our ascension happens, is in those moments where we're forced to grieve a part of ourselves and move forward. Another prime example of this is a Dark Night of the Soul episode, which is almost like having to grieve yourself, bury your own ego, who you were, in order to move forward into who you will be. And the best way that you can do that, because you don't know what the future holds, it's too difficult and painful to imagine what your future could be. The best way to do that is simply by staying present and living day by day. So you can ascend without consciously awakening, and you can awaken without consciously ascending. But the idea of ascension is that your vibration is raised and you're elevating your circumstances through some sort of logical, practical wisdom, as in like your character levels up. You've gained a little bit of experience, and you've also got this push to want to stay present and move forward. And I think that it can develop in spirituality as something as small as moving home and having to leave, parts of your life behind and focus on this future ahead, saying goodbye to your matrix life, as hectic as that, walking away from that matrix job and living your spiritual freedom. But when it comes to awakening is very interesting, because you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. And I feel a strange sense of deja vu. So I'm pretty sure I've spoken about this before in a live stream. But when it comes to awakening, it's this idea of like you're being given all of these spiritual downloads, and it can cause a multitude of effects on your physical vessel. So often this will happen completely unexpectedly if you've just managed to open a link to your guides, or it can happen when you're really seeking answers The idea of awakening in my mind is that it has to happen at a time when it is necessary. And I think that that's why many of us could spend years going on a pilgrimage around the world seeking answers through Buddhist monasteries and still not feel enlightened. Because awakening to me is about getting closer to your higher self and connecting with the collective energy and source and spirit. And I feel like those profound moments can only really happen to you when you're ready. And even then, say you receive that message, you receive that awareness, you receive that feeling of, oh my gosh, my life is a lie. I'm not where I'm supposed to be. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm not who I'm supposed to be. But what do I do now? You know, so you could sit in that awareness without acting upon it for a very long time. And I feel that that happens to a lot of people who are still very distracted or tethered to aspects of who they once were and aspects of who they need to still be. For example, say you're somebody who has a heck of a lot of responsibility, right? You've got mouths to feed, you've got a household to maintain, you've got a career to uphold, you've got a community to face and adhere to, and you awaken in the middle of the night after you've been through under all this stress and you've seen all these signs, and it's getting very difficult to sleep now. You're tossing and turning, you're starting to pick up on things that you'd never used to, you're starting to see things that you never used to, you're starting to feel things that you never used to, your food tastes are changing, your hobbies and interests are changing. It's very difficult to stay engaged in conversations around small talk. You have all these questions in your mind, you're thinking about people from your past, you're dreaming about your future, you're feeling very disconnected from your present. Oh my God, you're awakening. But you still have to maintain your household. You still have mouths to feed. The kids still need to go to school. You've still got to answer to the community and uphold your career. So, despite the fact that you know your life is changing and that a part of you has changed, you cannot challenge or undertake that journey yet until you have the freedoms to. So I feel like that happens to a lot of people, and they try to suppress that pull to embrace that new journey because they're just too tied to other responsibilities and commitments. Now, yeah, I feel like that's a whole nother that's a whole nother tangent that we could talk about, but I'd be curious to know if that's something that you can relate to, because that's something that I've heard happens to a lot of people, and I'll be honest with you, I haven't personally experienced it to that extent, except for maybe when I was really young, but it just manifested as I want to run away from home. You know, like I can't imagine the extent of some of those feelings of imprisonment, because it's like your soul is begging to leave, but your body, your heart, your mind is telling you to stay. So awakening, just because you've led that horse to water, you can't force it to drink. It's very interesting. That is how I would define the two differences. And it's honestly a very complex topic, as you can tell, that I have a lot of opinions on. And I feel like, yeah, it's something that in itself could be its complete own episode on here. Now, somebody's asked how to protect themselves from bad entities, and listen, sweets, I did a whole episode on this, so you're gonna have to go back and have a look at that protection episode I did with my auntie, because we did a lot of yarns and stories on protecting. I will bring it up in every episode because it is very, very, very important, but I don't know if it's going to entirely fit into this theme, so it'll probably fit better into the spirituality episode that I have in the works, so we'll follow that one instead. I believe it's time to get into it without further ado. Now, I've got this blog up, and the wind has just started as well. Not that I need to tell you that. I think you guys know from the sounds. Now, I'm on my website. I don't know if many of you know this, but I have a little subheading on my website called Journal. And it basically is where I keep all my blogs. And one of them is called Why You May Not Marry Your Soulmate. And from the looks of it, it was actually written on January this year. So it's actually not that old. I thought it was a year old. Not quite. It's only 9 months old. Okay, so, gosh, this is a topic that may trigger a lot of people. In fact, when I posted this blog, I got a lot of messages, emails, and just questions and comments about it, because I think that people felt really sad and disheartened when they read the title and didn't fully grasp the concept of the piece. So I do want to talk about it here, because the idea of why you may not marry your soulmate is basically addressing the complexities of soulmate connections, and the fact that you as an individual in this lifetime will be afforded many, many soulmates. They come in various forms, which is something that I want to talk about first. So the idea of a soulmate, let's get the terms out of the way, the terms and definitions. The idea of a soulmate is that they are a healing person, they are a healing energy. Let's not even say person. They are a healing energy that comes into your life exactly when you need them. They often come into your life with a purpose, and sometimes that purpose can be as small as to get you through this week and to make sure that you are not alone as you experience the hardships that you are currently facing. Or it could be as grand as to help you on your way through your purpose, to feel again like you're not alone and to overcome the challenges you face in your lifetime, which is where those soulmates can end up becoming our life partners. Soulmates can manifest as friends that only appear in our lives when we need them the most, and then they'll disappear when we don't need them. Very much like Nanny McPhee. When you want me, I won't be here, but when you need me, I will be here. Anyway, obviously the literature was much better spoken by the original author, but that's the general gist of it. A soulmate can be a very diverse term that can be applied to lovers, family, friends, animals, for example. I've talked about this before. Kirk, for me, is 100% a soulmate. Kirk has come into my life at a time where I really, 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 really needed him. And that scare that I had with him recently, if you don't know who Kirk is, by the way, Kirk is my cat. He is 16 years old and 1 month, and he recently had a health scare in August, and I literally thought I was going to lose him. And the main reason that I was so scared as well is because I know that he is an animal soulmate for me. He came into my life at a time where I was very, very, very mentally unwell. And again, I've just got to say a little trigger warning. I've talked about this in previous podcasts. I'm very open and comfortable with talking about my mental health now, but I understand that this is still a topic that not many people are comfortable hearing. So I'm going to give you a trigger warning. We're going to be talking about depression occasionally, anxiety occasionally, and suicidal ideations occasionally, okay? So trigger warning, trigger warning, trigger warning. Kurt came into my life in August, or was it September? Alex's partner, Abby, will know. My brother's partner was with me at the time. I think it was September, actually. So he's only been in my life for a year. But at the time that he came into my life, and I hadn't really shared this with a lot of people, I was extremely depressed. And it's very interesting because if you look back at my content from a year ago, you wouldn't think so. I was producing a lot of content publicly here on YouTube, and I had just, I was still working my other job as well, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I was still working my job in the homelessness program as well. So I had a lot on my plate, and yet I didn't have a lot at the same time. And it was a very dangerous part of my life where I just felt like I didn't have anyone to talk to. And I was very, very, very unwell to the point where suicide was on my mind every day. And it started to get very, very, very dangerous. And I started to get very, very, very afraid of how bad it would actually be, but I also didn't want to address it. I didn't want to feed energy into it. So there was like a healthy level of denial there as well, or an unhealthy level of denial as well. So Kurt came into my life in September, and literally by December last year, I was adamant on doing it and ending my life. And I know that this is heavy, but the positive that came out of it is that I probably would have done it had Kirk not been there. And his presence, this is going to make me cry because it's him that taught me to kind of stay more present and more focused on who I am right now, not so worried about who I will be or where I came from, but the beautiful person that I'm blossoming into at this very second in time. His presence in that house from the beginning, you guys know, if you know Kirk, you know, he's loud, he cries, he yells, he growls. He is such a presence, and I could not go through with it because I could not, first of all, get the peace and quiet to be able to do it. But second of all, I couldn't let him down. I couldn't reconcile the idea that I had just saved his life. I adopted him from an animal shelter and was going to take my own. Like that just didn't make sense to me. It went against all my beliefs. So I was like, crap, okay, thank you, Kirk. And so his presence in my life is very much, in my mind, a saving grace, and he is a prime example of how soulmates find you exactly when you need them and for a very specific purpose. And for me, his presence in my life is to ground me and to remind me of why it is so important that I'm still here and that I take advantage of my present moments. Oh my days, I didn't realize I was going to cry. Sorry guys. He just makes me so happy that I cry. Anyway, so the idea of a soulmate is that they're very diverse, they come in all shapes and forms, and they usually help you heal certain things in your life at specific times. So this is very different to twin flames that we had talked about previously. When a twin flame comes into your life, they often feel like a catalyst because they cause a lot of destruction, or not necessarily destruction, that's not the best word. They cause a lot of attraction, a lot of energy build up, frustration, obsession, and it just feels very crazy. And if you're an easygoing, laid back person, it can feel like this is just not going to be good, and it can trigger running or chasing. So the opposite is usually people in those situations end up running and can possibly find soulmates who help them through those challenging feelings that they were facing. Whereas a twin flame, most of your growth will happen when you're in separation from them. A soulmate will be there with you, helping you grow, helping you heal. A twin flame will be away from you while you're being challenged, triggered, and going through some of the difficult parts of your life. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't have union with twin flames. I got a lot of questions about that from the previous podcast. People can thrive in relationships with your twin flame. The key idea is that you both have to want it, and you both have to be able to address those uncomfortable feelings when they arise. Because aside from those uncomfortable feelings, there is so much love, so much unconditional passion, attraction, and adoration. You see yourself in that person, and if you can love yourself from the inside out, seeing somebody else embody that as well, I mean, I can only imagine it would be the most profound, incredible display of self-love, individual love, and union. So it is possible, but it does require that ability to come into union with yourself and accept somebody else for who they are as well, without trying to change them. So I'll go back to this blog now, why you may not marry your soulmate. And what I'm looking at here is a massive trigger warning that says, yikes. So I got to say that again, only because I start this article saying 9 times out of 10, a soulmate is not someone you will marry. Soulmates enter our lives with the objective to help us, assist us in our healing journeys, and steer us in the right direction when we lose our purpose. For this reason, they are more often than not platonic friendship connections. And that's what I was talking about with Kirk as an example. It was a very heavy example, so I do apologize to get straight into the heaviness. Now, the first point that I talk about is that a soulmate is not always romantic. And the main reason that I wanted to address that first in this article and today is because it's the most obvious answer. Many of you will have encountered connections like this from a very young age. A soulmate could manifest in your life as your first childhood friend, or as your first childhood pet, or as your first sort of childhood, maybe even a family member, if you're lucky. Not a lot of people, I was surprised to find out, have soulmate connections within their family, but it does happen frequently still. Because if you're not really in a place where you're meeting a lot of people, or if you're not really in a place where there are options for friendship, then usually you're given a family member who feels like a kindred spirit, someone who is a friendly ear, a warm, compassionate sort of presence who helps you go through those difficult challenges that you experience from a young age. Often, your soulmate connection as a friendship will be someone who just feels like you click with. You can't describe it. You're very similar. Maybe you're even different, interests, different people on the outside, but you meet them, you have that connection, you just seem to click, and it's very effortless to be around them. So often when we're younger, soulmates manifest as our friends who we meet in school or in other group settings. They could be our neighbor, for example, or just someone who spends time with us, and they end up being people that we trust, people that we can grow with in terms of as we grow as a child, as we have our questions, we can have this safe space with them to talk to in terms of these questions and these confusing thoughts that may be going into our minds. And often these people will manifest at times when things aren't 100% smooth sailing. So say you meet somebody over your summer break. I only say summer break because that seems to be something that is common in certain parts of the world. But yeah, say you meet them at a time in your life where it's fairly easygoing, it's really nice, and you click with this person, they're very fun. And then something happens. Maybe your parents start fighting. Maybe your childhood pet dies. Maybe a family member is in town and they're not very nice to you. And you've forged this strong connection with this person, and you open up to them and you start to tell them, like, hey, I'm actually not having the best time at home. Let's go out. Let's go spend some time like out at the park today. Or can I go over to your house? Usually these connections come into our life to kind of help us and heal us and keep us safe from things that are too overwhelming or have the potential to harm us in an unnecessary way. So the other way that you can identify these connections, which I mentioned in this article, is that they are natural, effortless, helpful, and kindred. In terms of the connection that you share. And when I say kindred, it's almost like a part of us is in a part of them, that we just have this kindred energy that is inexplainable. We just kind of click. We have similar humor, we have similar interests. It doesn't have to be all of them, but just having this unexplainable click connection with people. And it's even difficult, listen to me trying to explain it, it's even difficult to explain. That's why I keep saying unexplainable. But usually with people like this, their presence is so warm that conversation is effortless, or you don't even need to conversate. You can just sit in silence happily with them and it will feel comfortable. Now, the other point that I talk about in terms of why you may not marry your soulmate is that you will have many soulmates in your lifetime. And I've spoken about this before in this podcast and previously, but because you will have many soulmates in your lifetime, they will often manifest like family member, friends, or at times in your life where you need to grow. And what I really want to focus on with this point is this idea that when a soulmate comes in, they do have a purpose to fulfill in your life. So often what we'll find is that, say we have our parents going through a divorce, we're 13 years old, we're also going through puberty, we have all these questions about ourselves, let alone about our parents, we're angry, we're confused, we're feeling all types of ways because our body is changing as well. And we just need a safe space to be in and safe people to be around while we go through these challenging stages in our lives. So say this person comes in, maybe they've been a part of our life forever, and they really are like our rock in that time. They're someone to talk to, or they're someone to distract us from what we don't want to talk about. So we spend a lot of time with them. Our parents go through the divorce. We're still relying on this person to be this safe space for us. Our parents are now separated. We're living with our father now or our mother now, and seeing our other parent on the other weekends. And this person's still a part of our life, but slowly we notice, I'm actually talking to them less. Interestingly enough, they're changing schools now, and I'm really sad, but I've noticed that I've started talking to them less anyway. And before you know it, once the issue has resolved, once your parents have separated, once the divorce is final, once the challenges have begun to subside, that person's impact or influence in your life will also subside. And this happens all the time. And it doesn't have to happen on tumultuous, challenging terms, in terms of you don't have to have an argument with them in order for the connection to end. They'll just quietly disappear from our lives. Maybe they're going to a different school now. Maybe their parents have pulled them into a different part of the world, they're living in a completely different town now. Maybe you guys just stopped talking to each other. Nothing bad will technically have happened, but you just lost touch because their purpose in your life has technically been fulfilled. And sometimes, if there is another challenging situation that we encounter, those people will come back. But very often, especially when we're at those sort of transitional stages of our life, especially when we're younger, we just lose touch of these people, and we part on good terms with wholesome, warm memories of who they were, who we were, and who we were together. So the idea is that you aren't confined to any one soulmate relationship. You will be given many at different times in your life, and they will more often than not fulfill a specific purpose. Once that purpose has been fulfilled, they will pass. And to give you a personal example, this is what happened to me, I believe, with my ex. I do believe that my ex was a soulmate, 100%. I'm very grateful that he was, because he was this warm, loving energy that I really needed at that point in my life. And as he fulfilled that purpose, and as I fulfilled that purpose in his life, our need to be together started to become less and less obvious, and it started to become very hard to ignore the fact that we were growing into two very different people. And we did, technically speaking, part on good terms, but for my own personal growth, I had to cut it off completely. But these will often be people who, it's almost like you just feel like you've outgrown each other, or that you're just growing in different directions. It's not like a necessarily bad reason that you separate. And honestly, with my ex, we had many conversations for months and months and months. I would even argue a year, where we were like, what's going on here? What's happened? And both of us agreed that we had just fallen out of love, that we could technically still be in a relationship together, but it was just like two best friends hanging out. There was no attraction, there was no desire there anymore, if that makes sense. And it just felt like I had to start this other part of my journey now. I'd fulfilled the purpose in their life, and it was time to start focusing on myself. And other things started to happen that were inevitably pulling us apart. So these will often happen. This could happen to you many times in your lifetime. A lot of older people, I can think of one lady in particular, but I don't want to name her, but family will know her. So if you're a family member watching this and you got this far into the video, remind yourself to ask me who this lady is, because you will agree with me 100%. There are some people in their life who will be married, 3 or 4 times, or will have major serious relationships, 5 serious relationships, and they could swear to you with dead on that every single one of those people were their soulmates. And honestly, I now at this point in my life believe them, because you're not necessarily destined to spend the rest of your life with some of these people. Sometimes they just come in as this warm, healing energy to remind you that you're not alone, and to encourage you to continue to grow. And once they've fulfilled that purpose, your soul is reaching forward to the next thing, to the next stage, to the next part of your journey, and so is theirs. So it's not to disregard the idea that you will have a life partner, though. That's a completely different concept. But I do want to talk about the third bullet point in this blog next, because it very much is connected to what we've been talking about. The third point is that a soulmate's existence in your life is temporary. So I say that it is important to understand that a soulmate's purpose is to guide us, help us, and instigate periods of healing and growth. And I think that phrase, that little byline, is very, very, very key in understanding the basic idea of what a soulmate is. We kind of over-romanticize them sometimes. And listen, if it helps you get through your difficult times, dreaming about that beautiful person that you're going to spend your life with, do it. Because I'm not taking away from that. But a soulmate is so diverse, and it can be as simple as, just that person who we needed for that difficult 6 weeks in our life. And this makes me think of like those movies where there's that person who's like terminally ill, and they end up creating a friendship with another terminally ill patient, and they both kind of know that, well, this isn't really going to go anywhere, but let's just enjoy it for what it is. And they help each other through that difficult time, inevitably knowing that one of them is going to pass. That's a very extreme way of looking at it. Death doesn't have to be a factor, but that idea of how temporary the situation can be is something that you need to consider. And the only reason that I'm really talking about this is because I want you to feel like when you're in your deepest, darkest moments, you can have the faith or the comfort in knowing that there will be someone there to comfort you, and that there will be someone who is able to come through and be there with you to help you heal. Just because they aren't the person that you're going to spend the rest of your life with doesn't mean you should discredit their ability to be there with you right here, right now, whether it is your pet fish, whether it is your cat, whether it is the mailman who started striking up conversations with you because he's noticed that every time he delivers mail you're crying, whether it's your parents who keep calling you and hassling you but they're actually just really concerned about you because you've been quiet and haven't received any of their phone calls in a very long time, whether it's that annoying roommate that is just not leaving you alone and constantly bothering you by inviting you out. Sometimes our soulmates are right in front of us and we don't see them when we're in our deepest, darkest moments because we're looking for something more profound, and we're looking for something that is more romanticized and impactful. But a soulmate can be as simple as that person, that energy, that spirit, that animal that is literally just there to help us get through this difficult time and on to the next best thing. So I do want to address that the elephant in the room, which is how you separate and what it's like leaving a soulmate. So in my blog I say, once the path of healing has been cleared and the purpose of growth reinstated, the soul contract has been fulfilled and you no longer need that soulmate in your life. These endings can be painful, confusing, and counterintuitive, right? Here is somebody who helped you, likely cared for you until you were strong enough to take care of yourself. How can you abandon them now? First of all, you aren't abandoning anyone. Choosing to stay with a soulmate who has fulfilled their soul contract with you means that you are also limiting their growth and their potential. As dependent as you may be on each other and as much history as you may share together, an ending is inevitable, and it is important to know that you will each continue to grow separately without each other. Now, this is also addressing this idea that a soulmate can leave your life when you've become too dependent on them. And that is what I've noticed about myself and my soulmate connections. I'm a very independent person. I mean, geez, I feel like I say this in every single podcast episode. It's nothing that you don't already know. I'm a very independent person, and if I start to lose that, and if I start to become too dependent on the people around me, then I inevitably start to repel them, and it starts to become very difficult for me to continue to spend so much time with them, mostly because I'm losing sight of other aspects of my journey. I honestly, there are certain people in my life who I can spend all hours of the day with, as long as other areas of my life are being honored as well. And I think that that's the only turning point of it, can I say, or the counterpoint of it, is that it can also work the other way. Like, they could still be someone who is very much a strong presence in your life, but if you've become so dependent on them to the point where your whole life is about them and you're not at all focusing on your own growth, your own healing, or just who you are supposed to be, your own responsibilities, for example, you haven't even paid rent for the last 4 weeks because you've just been in bed with them, then you will start to notice these relationships break down as well, because the point of that connection is not to become dependent, it's to inspire and help each other to heal and grow. So having a dependable person in your life can be a helpful rehabilitation tool, but after the healing is done, they start to feel like extra baggage. Now, I do want to say that this is something that I talk about in the blog too. Oh my gosh. At this point in the blog, I need to be very clear here and tell you that nobody can tell you when to leave a relationship except your own inner voice, okay? So while others may point out your unhappiness and unfulfillment, it is between you and that person to end your connection. Now, I've got another blog about understanding karma as well, which I will probably put in the description box if I remember. Hopefully I remember. So that is the interesting thing about soulmates as well, is that they're there to help us grow. They're there to inspire us to continue healing with the safety and comfort of feeling like we're not alone and we don't have to do it alone. But if we become very dependent on them, it starts to feel like we're their extra baggage or they're our extra baggage, and you'll start to notice discontent in the relationship, and it will naturally break down anyway as well. Now, the fourth reason that I talk about in this blog is that soulmates remind us to stay present. So the other reason why you may not marry your soulmate is that they're there to help you stay present in a moment where you can't really think too far ahead and you really don't want to stay too far behind. So they kind of come into our life to bring us this childlike, foolish, kind of fun, naive energy. And they're there to simply inspire that joy and keep us present. So these kinds of soulmates are super fun, and they're often soulmates that we don't see in person regularly. I have a soulmate like this who I went to school with, and we could go, I think the longest period of time that I haven't spoken to her was like 6 years. And as soon as I saw her again, it was just laughing. I could not stop laughing. She was only in my life again for like another 2 days, and then we haven't seen each other since. But we both know that when it's meant to be, we're going to come together and just laugh our hearts out again, like sore stomach, tears everywhere kind of laughter. So these are the kind of soulmates that will come and go from our life, and they will just come in with the mere objective to raise our vibration, to make us laugh, to remind us of our childlike presence, and to keep us in this sort of youthful energy. Sometimes they're very cheeky, and when they come into town, it feels like we're up to no good all the time. It feels like we only just sort of get up to mischief with them. But again, there's no serious destruction. It's kind of like wholesome moments, wholesome memories, and points of sort of positive reflection in our timeline. As much as there could be chaos and some mischievous actions, there's often like deep and meaningful conversations as well, and staying up late and having existential conversations about how did we get here and where are we going. So those kinds of soulmates are ones that we probably won't marry, because they come and go as they please, with the pure objective of raising our vibration every time they come and leaving us with memories to look back on in times that are tough. So that's another reason why you may not marry your soulmate, because those ones are just the kind of quirky, fun, carefree friends that you'll only see once in a blue moon. And it's kind of part of the novelty of having them in your life as well. You like that they just come and go and they focus on themselves and they encourage you to do the same. So those are just some of the reasons why you may not marry your soulmate, and it's all under that context of how diverse a soulmate connection is, right? This idea that you will have many, many different soulmates in your lifetime, and that they will inhabit many, many different vessels, whether it's family, friends, lovers, pets, other animals. They come into your life at times where you need healing and safety and just some sort of warm support, because either you're going through challenges or your vibration just needs to stay present. Either you're too focused on your past and it's really hard to even think about your future, or you just need more joy in your life and you need another reason to laugh and smile. A soulmate will often remind us of who we truly are. And that's why in some of my readings, you may hear me talk about things like reconnecting with people who remind you who you are, and grounding yourself in connections that remind you of your values and how far you have come as well, which is what a soulmate can do. So I hope that was helpful. I'm going to start doing that part of the segment where I show you, or I get spirit to show us anything that I have missed. So for this segment today, I am using the Psychic Tarot for the Heart Oracle deck over here. If it will focus, has it focused? Kind of. Okay, I hope that's focused. This deck is an oracle deck that was made by John Holland. It is one of the first oracle decks I ever bought, because John Holland is everywhere. John Holland's a very easy person to buy from in Australia. You could walk into Big W, which is like a department store here, and find one of his oracle decks for sale. So I'm very grateful because it's a very good deck. Now, Spirit, what have I missed here? Is there anything else you want the collective to know about soulmates in general? Anything else that I need to cover? Any questions I need to answer when it comes to soulmate connections? Yeah. Win or lose, the Five of Swords. So it's really important with soulmates. This is a clear sign that you are going to be with a soulmate, okay? In terms of that person is actually a helpful person in your life and not just someone that's taking advantage of you by coming and going as they please. The thing about a soulmate is that they will be there to comfort us. They won't be there to create conflict, and they will be someone who actually doesn't really like to challenge or create more conflict than necessary. So their main impact in our life, I'm getting lazy with my mouth now. Their main impact in our life is to help us grasp challenging ideas and work through challenging ideas. This isn't by instigating them, but by helping us get through things that have been instigated by others, if that makes sense. So to compare them to a twin flame again, a twin flame will come into your life and instigate the challenges. They will come into your life and say, I hate tarot reading. I don't know how anybody watches it. How could you even believe those sorts of things? Nah, it's not real, any of it. And you're sitting there like, well, that's a personal example. I'd be sitting there like, but I really liked you. Why do you hate tarot reading? And then you're going through this challenging existential idea of like, the person that I really, really like doesn't like big part of who I am. What the heck? Whereas a soulmate would be sitting next to you going, how dare you talk to her like that? Are you joking? The audacity, you know? There's this feeling of a soulmate is someone who helps you. They won't instigate. Now, for that reason, a soulmate is someone who may struggle to talk to you directly. This won't be the case for all of you, but this is someone who is probably going to struggle to call you out on your bull crap, okay? This is someone who would rather just sort of like, oh, it's okay, I guess. It's not bad. And you're looking at them like, thank God I know you well, because I know from the sound in your voice that it's terrible. I just wish you would tell me the truth, but thank you for lying to me. That's the thing about a soulmate too. With the Five of Swords, difficult conversations when it comes to confronting issues in your relationship could be very, very, very hard to get through, because the nature of your connection is to be helpful and healing. So you don't like conflict at all. It feels very unnatural and counterintuitive to engage in an argument with a person like this. What else can you tell them about soulmate, Spirit? We have the Ace of Cups reversed. Wow, I need to clarify this because I'm getting a few different reasons or examples as to why that card might be out here. Why is the Lover Bounds card reversed, Spirit? What else can you tell them about soulmates? We have Judgment reversed. Wow. Yeah, a soulmate could be someone who we completely, excuse me, can you just focus? A soulmate could be someone who we don't fully recognize because we are focused on other people. Now, this is coming back to that idea of us really over-romanticizing soulmates and forgetting the simplicity of their nature. They're there to help us heal, to give us a safe place to grow, and to just help us feel warm and comforted in times that are challenging. And because we're so focused on that big, romantic, notebook-like relationship, we forget that we have 3 soulmates sitting in front of us and they're all here to cheer us up today because we've not been doing well, you know? And I have seen this happen to other people. I've been a fly on the wall of some incredibly tragic experiences, and one of them was a good friend of mine was going through a really difficult time, and they were grieving the separation of someone that they wanted in their life, and they spent all night telling everybody else in the room that they wish that one person was there. And we're all just sitting there like, we're here and we're here for you. So you got to remind yourself that a soulmate is there to keep you present, and they are trying to heal you and help you through any difficult thing that you're going through. But sometimes we don't notice them or acknowledge them for who they are and for how they are. And I feel like this happens to connections where we've become too comfortable with these people in our lives because either they are family or they're friends that we've known forever. And it is easy to just dismiss them as that friend that I've known since I was 8, or that mother that I've had since I was born, you know? So there is a feeling here of reminding yourself of what the core of a soulmate relationship is, and to not miss out on those really special, impactful moments with them that encourage us to just stay present and to focus on the here and now instead of what's going to happen in 2 weeks, what's going to happen in 5 years. Why did that happen when I was 5 years old? Why did that happen 3 weeks ago? You know, like a soulmate is literally just here to love us right here, right now. And those moments are so precious that often we don't truly appreciate them until they're gone. And this is something that I can personally attest to. You know, those beautiful people in our lives that we start to, when we've lost them, we start to think back and go, oh, I wish I spent more time with that person before their time was up. So Spirit, is there anything else that the collective needs to know about soulmates in general? Yeah, this is the 7 of Pentacles. So the thing about a soulmate is they're there when you need them, but not when you want them, okay? So if you don't need a soulmate in your life because they may only create more dependence and distract you from what you need to focus on personally, then Spirit isn't just going to be like, here, take it. They're going to be like, no, actually, listen, thank you for waiting. Thank you for asking. Thank you for having the audacity to raise your hand, but you don't need this right now. You trust that when you're meant to have it and when it is necessary, you will receive it. But you're doing so well by yourself, you really don't need somebody else to hold your hand through this. And that's kind of what these 2 cards are talking about as well. We have the Teach card and the Release card, both reversed. These are major arcana cards. We're looking at the Hierophant and the Death card. So the idea of a soulmate is to help us through those challenging times. But when we've grown, when we have the wisdom, right? When we've become the teacher, when we have released that burden, that baggage, then it is time to continue to move forward and to not become dependent or overtly clingy in terms of that connection or that need for that person in our life, that need to fill that void or that place in our life. It is time to let go. And again, you know, some of these people, they're never truly going to exit our lives. Their presence may sort of become less prominent, but their energy is always with us. And we feel that when we lose people that we really love as well. Just because their body is no longer on this earth, we still feel their energy when we talk about them or when we remember them. Or sometimes when we're just sitting having a cup of coffee, we smell them and we're like, wow. You know, so that's the same thing as a soulmate. It's about using them while they're there to get through that healing point in time, reminding ourselves that they're also there because they need us. But once that need has been fulfilled, it may be time to let go and keep moving forward. Now, the only thing that I want to close this reading with is that this is talking about the complexities of soulmate connections, right? This doesn't cover or completely exclude those 1 in a million connections where it's like, I've found the person, the one that I want to spend the rest of my life with. This is coming back to that same idea of like, nobody can tell you when to end a relationship except for you and that person that you're in a relationship with, right? It's up to the 2 of you to decide when that relationship ends and when it begins, technically. So it's really important that from this episode, you use it to understand how maybe there are many, many soulmate connections in your life that you didn't realize that you had, that you can cherish and continue to heal and grow with, while also waiting for the next few to enter as well. I hope that this episode has reminded you that you will have many kindred spirits that will come into your life exactly when you need them, and that you will still be able to find that person that you want to spend your life with. Just because we were talking about the likeliness of you not marrying your soulmate doesn't mean that it is impossible, right? You have so many soulmates that I don't think it would be possible for you to marry every single one of them. You can't marry your mother, for example. You can't marry your cat. So just because we're talking about all the relationships that you won't marry doesn't mean that you won't end up finding somebody very, 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 very special, very, 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 very healing, very, 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 very warm and comforting and nurturing and growth inspiring to spend the rest of your life with, okay? So I hope that you found this episode helpful. I hope, if anything, it made you sort of turn around and see how many beautiful souls you have in your life to be able to depend on, rely on, and love. And I hope that you continue seeking your truth, beautiful soul. Continue to grow, 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 with nurture being our bottom deck energy. Look after your beautiful selves. Thank you so much for joining me. I will have links down below for the articles that I referenced in today's video. Please submit all of your questions on my website. You'll find a form on my contacts page, or it's actually on my updates page as well. So there's plenty of different places that you can go to submit questions if you would like to have your question read in the next episode. I need to thank you so much for watching. If you want to listen to this episode rather than watch it in future, you can find this episode on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts from memory. Where else, Spirit? Spotify and Deezer. I think I got all of them. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you very, very soon. Bye!